Hey and welcome everyone, what's up? Today we are checking out a laptop from a brand that's not super well known around here, but despite the relatively low price, it actually managed to surprise me in a couple of aspects and really in a good way as well. This one is the Tulpar T6 3.5 with an RTX 5060 mobile and an Intel i7 14700HX. And Tulpar is actually a Turkish brand, but up until not too long ago, they were selling under the name Monster or Monster Laptop.
And just for transparency, the review unit was only loaned to me. It's going back afterwards, no money was involved, and there were zero instructions or any kind of obligation to even make a review. And that's why I'm also gonna talk about the things that I didn't really like here. But as always, let's quickly start with the technical specs to satisfy the inner nerd in you right away. So as mentioned, we've got an Nvidia RTX 5060 mobile with 8GB of GDDR7 VRAM, which can theoretically pull up to 115 watt, but that only happens in synthetic benchmarks, because in games I almost always saw a maximum of just 70 watt in all performance modes. And that means, compared to a laptop that can pull, say, 100 watt on the RTX 5060, this one is definitely a bit slower. The GPU is paired with an Intel i7 14700HX, which isn't the newest CPU, but it's still a super fast processor and absolutely sufficient for this laptop, with 8 performance cores that support hyperthreading and an additional 12 efficiency cores, so 28 threads in total, resulting in insanely good multi-core performance. On the full load, the CPU here goes up to around 120 watt almost constantly for several minutes. In games, it's usually around 40 to 70 watt, depending on demand. The CPU definitely won't become a bottleneck here or anytime soon. On top of that, this model comes with a generous 32GB of DDR5 RAM at 5600 megatransfers per second, consisting of two 16GB sticks. There's also a pretty fast 1TB M.2 SSD with solid read and write speeds of around 3000 to 4500 MB per second. The 16-inch IPS display with 165Hz and a 16:10 aspect ratio has a resolution of 1920 by 1200 pixels. You also get Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3, a 53.3 Wh battery, a 230 watt power brick, and Windows 11 Home pre-installed. Connection-wise, on the left we get USB 3.2 Type-A and a 3.5mm audio jack. At the back you'll find the power connector, a gigabit LAN port, HDMI 2.1 and a USB-C 3.2 port. And on the right side there's another USB 3.2 Type-A and a Type-C port, which can even be used to charge the laptop as an alternative. So overall, pretty solid. Nice that some of the ports are at the back. And the only thing really missing here would be Thunderbolt or USB-C 4. You can open the laptop pretty easily and cleanly, and inside we find the very good cooling system, which I'll talk about in a moment. You can also swap or upgrade the RAM without any issues, install a second M.2 SSD, or even replace the rather small battery. But maybe all of this is irrelevant to you, because Tulpar apparently offers a lifetime free maintenance service for their laptops, meaning you can send the device in for free and within 3 days they'll apply new thermal paste, clean the device, update the BIOS if there's any updates available, and check all the hardware. I obviously can't verify that myself, but I'd really love to know whether that still holds true in 3 to 5 years. Would definitely be a super nice thing for users who don't feel confident opening their laptop and doing this stuff themselves. In my opinion, the build quality of the Tulpar T6 3.5 is one of the, if not the biggest weakness of this device. I'm assuming this is a so-called Clevo barebone chassis with Tulpar logos slapped on and matching hardware selected. Basically an off-the-shelf design. At 2.35 kg, it's an average weight for a 16-inch device, but with a height of 2.5 cm, it's definitely belonging to the chunkier laptops. The display lid can be pressed in very easily, and the overall stability of the plastic chassis is honestly pretty questionable. At least you can open it with one hand without any issues. The backlit keyboard was also pretty poor in my opinion. At least 3 of the keys made kind of a squishy smacking sound when pressed, as if they were sticking to something underneath. The keyboard deck in general can be pressed down way too easily. The touchpad on the other hand was fine, even though I would have liked it to be a bit larger. Click and feel and glide quality were very good though. The 16-inch display uses a 16:10 aspect ratio with a resolution of 1920 by 1200p, which I think is a good decision overall since the 8GB of VRAM would be too small for more pixels anyway. The 165Hz refresh rate is acceptable for this IPS panel and the rest of the hardware. Using my Spider X Pro, I've measured a very solid peak brightness of 456 nits, which is more than bright enough even in well-lit rooms. Color space coverage is absolutely fine, 100% sRGB and somewhat lower but still decent values for the other color spaces. Unfortunately, the display had quite noticeable backlight bleeding. In my opinion, this is caused by the wobbly display construction and will actually vary from unit to unit. Here you can easily see that when I was gently moving the display lid. Fitting the Clevo barebone theory, there is an unbranded control center software that just screams I am a barebone laptop chassis. But here you can adjust various performance profiles and fan settings. There's also a mux switch to disable the integrated GPU, and you can limit the maximum battery charge. So basically everything you really need for a laptop. Now let's talk about the fan system. It keeps temperatures at good levels under all conditions. In performance mode it is pretty loud at 56 dB, but even in entertainment mode you get almost no performance loss while dropping down to just 46 dB. And even in quiet mode the performance is still enough for AAA games, and the system becomes truly quiet at only 35 dB. That is really good for a gaming laptop. Here the CPU performance is mostly reduced, while the GPU still holds up relatively well. Depending on the game you get more or less performance loss, sometimes even none at all, especially when the CPU isn't heavily used. You can also see this quite well in the Cyberpunk 2077 example. Here you do have noticeable performance losses, but for the low noise level it is still absolutely acceptable. And with Assassin's Creed Shadows, oddly enough, there's basically no performance drop at all, despite the system becoming very quiet. The speakers are, like in most gaming laptops and in this price category, at best mediocre. Long term, they're not really recommended. Too little bass, very treble heavy, not loud enough, well, meh.
By the way, this is what the integrated 720p webcam looks like and what the integrated microphone sounds like. And this is what it sounds like typing on the keyboard while recording.
The battery life of the 53.3 Wh battery is also pretty disappointing. This is definitely not a laptop for high mobility. Even at idle with 20% display brightness, I only got around 5.7 hours. Watching YouTube at 50% display brightness gave me just 3.5 hours, and under full load the small battery tapped out after around 40 minutes. The idle power consumption of the CPU and overall system is simply way too high here. Now let's get to the performance tests. In Cinebench R23, the Tulpar T6 3.5 reaches 24,890 points in multicore and 2,129 points in single-core with the i7 14700HX, really solid numbers. Meaning the CPU is still absolutely future-proof and genuinely a fast laptop processor. In the PC Mark 10 system test, the laptop scores a respectable 7,620 points in performance mode and still 6,586 in quiet mode. In the Blender benchmark, the RTX 5060 Mobile scores 3,490 points, which is roughly on the level of a desktop RTX 3070 Ti or even an AMD RX 7900 XT high-end desktop GPU. In the Budget System benchmark for Premiere Pro, it achieved a solid 10,605 points and 8,210 points in the Photoshop benchmark. And here are the overall scores from various 3D Mark tests. Feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look.
Alright, so let's take a look at the real-world gaming performance of the Tulpar T6 3.5 in a handful of games. I captured everything using an external capture card on my desktop PC at the native 1200p resolution of this display here. So there's basically zero performance loss from recording. So yeah, let's just jump right into the benchmarks.
For ARC Raiders, I went with 1080p, epic settings and DLSS transformer on quality. Transformer in particular looks fantastic on a laptop display anyway. This resulted in an average between 100 to 125 FPS. Here you can clearly see the 5060 mobile hovering around roughly 70 watt. And the temperatures stay very solid, so despite running on Unreal Engine, this plays absolutely butter smooth. As far as I can tell so far, the game is just very well optimized. For Clair Obscur Expedition 33, yes, go ahead and judge me, actually used frame generation by 4 for once, simply because the game isn't real-time action-based and still feels totally responsive. Combined with 1080p high settings and DLSS set to native resolution, so no upscaling, it averaged around 170 FPS. The displayed 1% lows can be ignored, they correspond to the base frame rate. And yeah, it played beautifully. In Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, with high settings, DLSS transformer on quality, and at 1080p, it reached a full 108 FPS on average with very good 1% lows of 82. Hard to ask for more. You can certainly play without upscaling here as long as the small VRAM is able to keep up. And I'll never get tired of praising how insanely well optimized this game is. Just really, really good. Again, temperatures for both GPU and CPU stayed very solid even after 15 minutes. Oh, and if I get around to it, I'll make an extended gaming test video for this laptop, and if I remember, I'll even link it up here right in the top corner. All in all, the Tulpar T6 3.5 delivers quite a lot of performance thanks to its strong processor and the modern NVIDIA RTX 5060. Sure, the GPU can't reach its full potential due to the slightly reduced maximum TDP, but for this Full HD display it still manages more than 60 FPS in pretty much every game, even though, like most mobile GPUs, we only get 8GB of VRAM, unfortunately. What really stands out positively is the cooling system, the fast processor and the overall performance. On the negative side, definitely the build quality, the keyboard and the battery life. And at the end of the day, as always, it depends on the price. If this device is cheaper than comparable models from Acer, Asus or Gigabyte, it's definitely worth considering. And the lifetime free maintenance service is, as far as I know, something you don't really get anywhere else.
Alright, and that's it for today. If you enjoyed the review, feel free to drop a like or maybe even subscribe to the channel for more laptop stuff, gaming benchmarks, gaming handheld and mini PC content. Also, thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.